Welcome to the Known Experience. So glad you're with us today. I got my co-host Sean Scott coming in a little under the weather from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Matthew Berry, fantasy sports guru, coming from Stamford, Connecticut. Is that right?
No, I work out of Stamford, Connecticut, but I'm actually doing this from my home office in beautiful Cheshire, Connecticut, which is where I live.
Lovely Cheshire, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the conversation, for those of you who don't know who Matthew is, I'll just go through all the accolades. Matthew, you just take it humbly like you always do, okay? Matthew has been live on-air talent with ESPN and NBC, two of the sports leaders. He has a New York Times bestseller. He's a phenomenal writer. Highly encourage you, pick it up. Fantasy Life. It's whether you love fantasy sports or not. It's entertaining and it's touching. It's a great book. He's been in Avengers Endgame with Robert Downey Jr., Robert Redford, Chris Hemsworth. He gets texted by Chris Pratt and Jay-Z on what fantasy sports picks to make. He's been on Jimmy Fallon. He last week played football with Brady and Gronk on the beach, caught a touchdown pass, which I saw. You put some moves on Gronk. It's pretty impressive. Most famously, though, he went to high school with me, A&M Consolidated.
In fairness, I like to think you went to high school with me, but yeah, fair enough. We did. You and I did attend the same high school at the same time.
That's correct. And you were on my show. So, we
Fair.
can talk success.
All right. You know what? Absolutely. That's right, John. That's how you do it. That's good. That's right. That's how you should sell it. 100%. Good for you. Yeah, that's right. You're damn right. Take control. Good.
So this pod is not really going to be about fantasy sports. It's going to be just about life and our lives. And but there's one story before we jump into that is about fantasy world.
And we should say though, John, we should say though, in all seriousness, I think you're underselling one aspect though, which I think is important here. No, in all seriousness, no, yes, we went to high school together, but people don't understand what that means, right? Because we could have gone to a high school that had 2,000 kids in it, and you know what I mean? And like, you know, just because you say, oh, you went to the same high school with somebody, I could have been a senior when you were a freshman or vice versa, everything like that. It just, no. So John was a year younger than me, I believe, right? When I was a senior, you were a junior, or we were the same year? I can't remember. We were the same year?
We were the same. We were actually, we both moved to College Station at the age of 12. Both of our fathers were professors at A&M.
Yes, I remember,
and we were both popular adjacent, if you will.
Yes, that's right. Both of us had a lot of friends that were legitimately popular.
Yeah.
And but no actual popularity on our own. Popular adjacent is a great way to phrase it, John. But John and I were friends, and we knew each other. I wouldn't say we were particularly close in high school, but we were certainly friendly. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have any beef, as the kids say. We would say hi to each other, and again, we had a lot of friends in common. So there were often, you know, maybe not often, but there were definitely times where we socialized or we were in the same place at the same time. But then since that time, there is a group of us that have gotten together at various reunions and everything like that and have become close. So there's a group, and John and I are on a text thread with, I don't know, 5 other people, maybe. It's on that text thread. So of all of us, high school. So John and I have become closer friends since we graduated together. But, you know, I don't think it's fair just to say, oh yeah, we went to the same high school. You know, I think people want that context. They want to understand.
No, that's
they want to know, why on earth is Matthew Berry doing this show I've never heard of?
Wait.
And that's the reason why is John called in his, hey, I've known you for 30 plus years favor, and that's fine. It is what it is. So here I am.
You don't think
Great.
people
I'm
are
on your
listening to
podcast.
this going, John is finally helping Matthew out? You don't think that's the so here is some other juxtapositions of us in high school. Our high school was about 250 people in our graduating class. I was ranked about 245th. Matthew, I'm guessing, was probably in the top 20 there.
Oh, no. I was a solid like B student. Like I was smart enough, like I was lazy, to be honest with you. Like I never liked homework. I never liked applying myself. I was smart enough to get away with it. Mm-hmm. So, but no, I mean, like, was I like our mutual friend Olivia Kelly? Like, was I brainy like her? No. Like, you know, No, they were legit smart people, and I was not one of them. I'm pretty smart, I think, but I definitely did not have great grades. I was smart enough to do the bare minimum and get like a B and sort of just, get out unscathed.
You were much, it sounds like much like myself, and it drove teachers and my parents crazy because I was like the untapped potential guy, right? Sean, we know you can do better than an 88. You always get the 88. Where's the other two?
What's weird is that Sean, I wasn't the untapped potential guy. I was, for lack of a better way to describe it, I was the ADD guy, because I did. When I was in high school, I actually achieved quite a bit. It's been all downhill since. But in high school, I was the star of the tennis team. I was the number 1 ranked player on the high school tennis team all 4 years that I was in high school, and we went to the state finals my junior year, and I won district every year, and blah 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 blah. And I was doing a lot of stuff with the drama club, and so we did a bunch of plays and competitions, that sort of thing. And my senior year of high school, believe it or not, I was actually a rock and roll DJ. I was Matthew Rock and Roll Berry at 1240 KTAM, classic rock, Bryan College Station's classic rock. So from 7 to midnight, Monday through Friday, 7 to midnight, I was like the nighttime DJ on this classic rock station in our hometown. But the town where John and I lived, and again, you have to remember, John and I graduated high school in 1988. So this is, pre-internet, pre-iPods, or having music on your phone, or, music on demand or podcasts or anything like that. None of that existed. So AM radio was actually not as antiquated as it might seem now. Right. And we were a small town, like, Bryan College Station, the area that we grew up in, probably 150,000 people lived in that area, would be my guess, at the time that we grew up. And so there was a handful of radio stations. It was a rated market, which means like, Arbitron, which is similar to Nielsen, would like literally do ratings and for the radio stations. And so it was a real radio market, not a huge one, but a real one. And I got a job, my high school job throughout high school, when I was, started as a part-timer when I was 14 and worked my way up, was working at this radio station. At first answering phones and going to remotes and doing various things. And then ultimately like doing weekend shifts, doing late night weekend shifts, doing then Saturday during the day. And eventually for my senior year in high school, I got the Monday through Friday, 7 to midnight show. I would go to high school during the day. I would go to tennis practice after school, I'd go home, do my homework or not, candidly, and then go into the station from like 6 to midnight. I had to do commercials from 6 to 7. And then from 7 to midnight, I did my show Monday through Friday. And so,
wow,
I think so number one is like, I've been in front of a microphone almost my entire life, the majority of my life. But more importantly, I think I got a bit of a pass on my grades of quote unquote not applying myself, because I was quote unquote achieving in other areas. Like I showed some potential. I was just all over the place doing a bunch of different stuff.
That's accurate though. I mean, you weren't just sitting on the couch.
He was not playing the Atari 2600 nearly as much as I was. But I do remember calling into your show. I was one of the few kids that thought it was cool that you were a DJ on an AM classic rock radio station, stereo AM, by the way. And I remember calling in and requesting stuff. And I also remember you teaching me a little DJ secret, that when the DJ plays Stairway to Heaven, it's probably because he had to take a dump, because it's like an 8-minute song.
Yeah, that was always important, was trying to figure out like songs, right? Exactly. There was a couple of, when I had to go to the bathroom, like with Stairway to Heaven, let's see,
Freebird, maybe
Freebird. I was going to say Leonard Skinner's Freebird was a really good one. Again, this is classic rock of, the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s back then. So Freebird was always a really good one as well. American Pie. American Pie was 8 minutes, 13 seconds. He played the long version of American Pie. So yeah, it was always important to like find a song like that, if you needed to, do something outside of the DJ booth.
Well, this leads me to
who are the other kids? You know what, John, let's do this. So you say you were one of the few people that thought it was cool that I was a DJ in high school. And so I think what we should do now is spend the rest of the episode going through which kids in high school legitimately thought it was cool and which ones were talking shit behind my back about me being a DJ. And let's settle some scores from over 3 decades ago. Let's do this and let's go through. I want names. I want names and like, let's call them out. And I'm going to look them up on Facebook and decide whether I'm friends with them or not. We'll make fun of them. Maybe they have ugly kids now. Let's go through. Let's make this happen.
That's going to be part 2. If that could be part 2, we'll go through Mark Parrish and all. I guarantee you, Mark Parrish was a fan.
I like Mark Parrish. I do like Mark Parrish. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. This is kind of funny. Whenever you first were on TV on ESPN, I remember being at home and telling my mom, and I think I remember taking you to youth group with me once when we were in like junior high. And my mom, I told my mom you're on TV, and she goes, "That nerdy Jewish kid with the glasses and the fro." And it's hard for people who see you now to believe that you had a big fro when you were playing tennis. You were like had kind of the John McEnroe.
I did, yeah. But life is. Thanks, Mom. It was a little harsh from your mom, by the way. I mean, all fair, but
you should hear the things she says about me.
Right.
What was it like, being a kid in a small Texas town, a Jewish kid who came from mostly the East Coast?
Right.
What was that like? I mean, your background, your family, your heritage was radically different than everybody else around you.
Yeah, it was weird, honestly, John, and took some adjustment, and I appreciate it. I mean, and I sort of became like weirdly, I sort of through high school, I kind of became kind of a de facto Methodist. Right. I mean, because honestly, all my friends, and I do remember going to that. I thought it was more than one, honestly, that you took me to. And like, there was a group of friends, like, you remember David Runnels, and so him and like Sean Lofgren, if you remember those guys, and like, they were very involved as well. So I went to a lot of those like Methodist youth, whatever they were called, like, like sleepovers or like parties or that kind of stuff. And so I did a lot of that stuff because it was weird. I'll never forget this. I remember I had been, maybe I was there a week. I'd moved in, and you and I'd moved in around the same time, right? So I'm there, and I'm sitting at the lunch table, and this is 7th grade. And so I'm sitting there at the lunch table with a group of people, and somehow, I don't know how it comes up, but religion comes up. I think maybe it was, I'm trying to think of, like, maybe it was Easter or something, like Christmas. I don't know. There was a big holiday was coming up, and maybe it was Christmas. And somebody said something to me like, "Oh, Matthew, what do you do? Do you celebrate Christmas? What are your family's plans for Christmas?" Something, generic like that. I said, "Well, we don't celebrate Christmas. I'm Jewish. We celebrate Hanukkah." And this girl looks at me. She's just looking at me like curiously. And, she's just like staring at me, and I'm looking at her, and I go, "What?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm trying to see your horns." And I'm like, "What?" And she's not saying it. This is the most important part. She's not saying it in a mean way. She's not saying it in an insulting way. She's not saying it in a derogatory way. She's genuinely curious where my horns are. She's, wide-eyed and smiling and like, and I go, "Horns?" And she goes, "Yeah, my daddy told me all Jewish people have horns, and I've never met one before." And so it was, and I'm just like, well, I guess they only come out on special occasions. Like, I made some joke, and other people like staring at her. But like I was just like that. It was that moment where I was just like, oh, I'm in Texas now. Holy crap. Like
you didn't,
wow. And like, there were
did you pull your shofar out of your backpack at that point?
I did not pull my shofar, did not put my yarmulke on my head, but it was weird. And it definitely it was definitely tough. I definitely had an adjustment, like, not to unpack my entire high school career, but it was definitely weird. I don't know that religion played the entire part of it, but I think I was a sensitive kid, so I was a sensitive Jewish kid in South Central Tech, growing up in Texas. Whether I'm a sensitive kid because I'm just a sensitive kid or because I was Jewish, but my point is that there were very few Jewish kids in the high school. that we went to, like there was not a temple in town. The Texas A&M University, where we grew up, is located, had a B'nai B'rith chapter that was sort of used as kind of the temple, but we didn't have a proper temple. I literally think the only Jewish kid in our high school besides me was Ben Basikis. Remember Ben?
Yeah.
And like, so it was just, it was definitely weird. I definitely felt like an outsider. So, I'm coming in, and to your mom's, I would have preferred maybe a slightly different description, but your mom's description was accurate. Is I had this big frizzy hair, I had big thick glasses. I wear contacts now, but I have terrible eyesight. So back then I had these big thick glasses, frizzy hair. I'm like this nerdy, sensitive kid. I'm Jewish, and I'm coming into a high school in Texas where, literally kids, I remember being in high school and kids, chew tobacco, and not like illegally, not like hiding it. You know what I mean? And so it just, it was I felt like an outsider throughout high school. And I think the fact that I was a different religion than, 99.9% of the people in high school was one of the factors. I don't think it was the only factor, but I think it was one of the factors that I felt like an outsider. And it took me a while to sort of find myself in high school. And I found like a good group of friends. And that was about it, and I just sort of but I definitely, and I've written about this before. There was definitely times in high school where I felt bullied. I had some really tough years there as well. And it was definitely an adjustment. It was definitely an adjustment. And I think, John, if I'm being really honest here, as we get into this, if I'm being really honest here, I think one of the reasons why, if I really am honest about my own psychology, is that one of the reasons why, like I've attended every single reunion we've had.
Yeah.
I've gone back, and not everyone has, I mean, there's some people that do, and then there's some people that don't. And then there's some that have popped in here and there. But, it's been over 30 years, right? So we've had a number of reunions over the years. And I do that. I think one of the reasons why I've so enjoyed like the little text thread that you and I are on, and that little friendship group that's joined, and also why why I've gone to every single reunion is because I feel that there's a part of me that feels like my high school experience was cheated a little bit, that because it was because I was viewed in this certain light, because I was socially awkward, because I was insecure, and there were definitely kids that didn't make my life easy in high school, that definitely, went out of their way to make me feel unwelcome, and that were cruel to me. So I think it's partially that I feel like I'm trying to regain some of that. And Sean, I'll just tell you this: like, if there's ever a time to go to your high school reunion, it's after you've been on national television. Like, that's a good gig. That's like walking into your high school reunion after you've been on national TV for a decade, and they ask you for your picture for the program or whatever, and you can send it a picture of you holding an Emmy award. That was pretty cool.
You got to tell the story. Is this where you're going? Are you going to the reunion store where you thought I'm finally going to be the big man on campus?
That's where I was going to go. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So this is a story I've never told publicly. John, you and I were talking before the show about what's a story I've never told publicly. Here's a story I've never told publicly. So I'm going back to my high school reunion. And I think before I tell you my high school reunion, what I should tell you is that one of the people that John and I went to high school with is a woman named Joan Bush. And you know how John and I were talking before about how we were popular adjacent? Joan Bush was popular. Joan Bush was popular. And a really sweet girl. Like, I wouldn't say we were friends, but hi Joan, hi Matthew, whatever. We say hi in the hallway. But when we were freshmen, she dated, I don't know if it was the captain of the football team, but she dated whoever the most popular, good-looking, high school senior that was there. They were dated, and I remember being a junior in high school and walking out of high school one day towards our parking lot with her. We were just walking out at the same time. We were chit-chatting about whatever, and all of a sudden, like this, souped up, sweet Camaro pulls up, like this, again, it's 1988, right? And this really sweet Camaro pulls up and she's like, all right, that's my ride. That's my boyfriend or whatever. And, she gets in and it's like, she was dating like some college guy, right? As a high school junior. So Joan was always, always really popular. And so it's fine, right? Okay. So now flash forward, it's our 10-year reunion. And I come in at this point, I've been on ESPN. I've been on ESPN for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years at this point. And, so I've been on TV. I've been on national TV. I've been on some of the ESPN's biggest programs like Sunday NFL Countdown, Monday Night Football, the pregame show there. I've won a sports Emmy for Fantasy Football Now, my Sunday morning show. It's pretty good, right? And so I walk in, I finally like, you know what? I'm going to go. All these kids that, some of these kids that made fun of me in high school or whatever, like I'm walking in, it's pretty cool. And literally so I walk in and it's awesome, right? And so people that ignored me in high school are coming up to me. They're kissing my butt a little bit. There's a slideshow of everyone's sort of photos of kind of them at their job or what they're doing now. And mine comes up and I'm holding the Emmy Award and I literally get a round of applause, this huge round of applause from all of my high school, classmates. It's awesome, right? Then Joan Bush walks in and we're saying hi and she comes over to the group that we're at and we're all sort of saying hi. And so then Joan goes, oh, I want you to, Matthew, this is my husband, John. And I'm like, and he holds up his hand. He says, hey, nice to meet you, John Rich. I'm thinking to myself, I know who you are, dude. So it's John Rich of Big and Rich, which is, the country music of Big and Rich, and especially, by the way, in 1998.
They're huge.
Yeah. Huge.
Save a horse.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy. Right. They're huge. And I literally start laughing because it's like, of course, Joan Bush is married to like a country music superstar, or a rock star. If she'd walked in with a president, it wouldn't have been surprised me. Anyway, so now I'm like, oh, great. So there was a moment there where I was the most famous guy in the room, right? And I was excited. And now all of a sudden, here's John Rich, showing up with Joan, and like everyone, and again, right, Rich and Big and Rich, and anyway, and so there went that. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, your perspective on that stage of life is probably better than mine. I've done the exact opposite. I have not been to one of my reunions, not because my experience was particularly awful. I was also adjacent to a lot of the guys, but it was more, in retrospect, it's like almost being ashamed of who you were, right? And how you didn't speak up and stand your ground. And I'm like, that is not who I am, right? That's not who I've been for a long time. And I don't recognize who I was. And I actually don't want to, I don't know how it would go off if I saw those guys again. I have some, my wife is like, yeah, that would be a pretty uncomfortable reunion if you were there, because you tend to tell people what you're thinking. And so it's just interesting to hear you say you've gone back. But I have not reconciled that part of my past, I don't think.
Well, I mean, I think you and I are built differently and we probably had different experiences. For me, it's entirely petty, and it's three things. It's three things. And it's petty and ego driven. Right. And third enjoyment, because I legitimately, whether it's John or Chris or Monica or Jimmy and Jane, or there's a handful of people that I genuinely enjoy seeing and spending time with. And it's an excuse because I live now in Connecticut and I went to high school in Texas, as we talked about. And so most of the people from my life from that live in Texas. They live in College Station or Dallas or Austin or Houston. And so I just don't get the chance to see them very often. And so, and there are people that, I don't know if they live, if I would be, hardcore friends with them, but there are people that I'm sure there are people in your life, John, as well, where you're like, that you're not the best of friends with them, but you're like, I genuinely like that person. And it's good to see that person. I don't need to see that person every week, but it's nice to every year, every couple of years. Hey, how are you? How's the wife or husband? How are the kids? How's your job? Oh, I'm good. I'm glad to know you're doing well, that you're, I have positive feelings towards you and that kind of stuff. But, the petty and ego stuff is, like whatever. I've spent 15 years on national television. I've written a New York Times bestseller. I've been in the highest grossing movie of all time worldwide. I've been on the Tonight Show. I've been on the Howard Stern Show. I've been on 60 Minutes. Like, I mean, it's like, yeah, like if you've accomplished that kind of stuff, if your life has been lucky enough to have had that kind of a journey, and I'm incredibly blessed. Yeah, part of the point of having a career like that is to go back to high school and rub it in all the assholes' faces that that made fun of you, and like all the girls that turned you down in high school, just sort of like, what could have been, like 100%.
You just
like,
channel you channel
1,000%. It's entirely petty and ego driven.
Interior Nick Kyrgios, right?
Right. Yeah. Totally. Listen, I mean, like, and there were absolutely women at our high school reunion over the years. There have been different women that have come up and said, "Oh, remember we went on that one date," and I'm like, "Oh, that have literally sort of like thrown out that like, I made a mistake and, tried to sort of open that door and done that and like, kind of stuff." I just like laugh and and my wife will see them, anyway, it's just, my wife will laugh at it. Anyway, so
I've had none of those, but I'm waiting for Joan to come to the 35th reunion with like Tom Brady or somebody.
Right.
So that you can
1,000%.
again, let me say this about Matthew, is that, I've worked with some people that are, I'd say, moderately successful and busy and have a lot going on and have families, and they're not always easy to get a hold of. And like you said, we weren't buddies in high school. We did stuff together. We were in the same popular adjacent community where
we were friend adjacent.
Yeah, exactly
right.
People outside probably thought we were friends and we knew we weren't.
Right.
So yeah. But what I wanted to say about you today is that we all know people that are successful that are we were closer to at one point, and now we can't get a hold of them. We can't get past the gatekeepers. We can't get them to respond. And you and I weren't super close, but there's not been a time that I didn't reach out to you, whether just to say hi, I'm in New York, or whatever, that you didn't respond. I remember your first night on NBC, I just texted you a congrats, right? No big deal. And like an hour later, you texted me and you're like, "Hey, sorry, I'm kind of busy tonight, but I just want to say thanks for your message." And I'm like, who are you? Like, who does that? So, I mean, why, you've shed a little light on it, but why is that important to you to just, you let people know that they're seen, whether they have anything to offer you or not? And why is that important to you?
I think it's two reasons, right? And I appreciate you saying all that. You're very kind. Number one is that I think it's important just in general to try to be present, right? And I'll tell a story in a second about just so there's two answers to that question, right? Number one is I'll say specific to you. Here's what I'll say is that I try to be responsive. It's a complicated answer. Here's what I would say. Number one is that if I don't respond quickly, I'll never respond. Like it just gets piled up. So I've learned that lesson that like, if I'm like, there have been times that people have texted me stuff and I think to myself, I want to respond to that really, really thoughtful. So I'm not going to respond to it. And then a month goes by and I'm like, fuck, I never I forgot to, I genuinely want to, but it's just like, so if I don't respond quickly, then I just know it gets lost in the pile of texts and emails and DMs and email, and just, demands on my time. So number one, it's just that. Number two is that specific to you, I know because I've known you for so long that I know when you're reaching out, that you are reaching out in a genuine way, that you're happy for me as your friend that you've known for a long time. And that there's no agenda on your side, because when you get to a level of, for lack of a better phrase, prominence, right? People see me on TV and they assume a bunch of different things. They assume like that I have access to, that I have, that they think I have a certain level of wealth, that I have a certain level of access, that I have a certain level of ability to reach other people. But the point is that, I get hit up for a lot of like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you, And so, and I know, because I've known you forever, I know that when you text me like that, you're coming at me from a very genuine, just happy for me place. There's no agenda there. The other thing is, the other story I'll tell, which I think I've told this story a little bit before, but I think it's a great story, and I think you'll enjoy it, John, specifically because you know two of the people involved in it. My very first job out of college was I worked as a production assistant for the George Carlin Show, which was a sitcom that ran on Fox. And in essence, I was the stage PA, production assistant, as PA stands for. And what that meant is, like, I answered the phones, I got lunch for the cast, I did a bunch of different, I basically took messages for them. Again, this is 1993. So it's pre cell phones, or not everyone really had cell phones. They weren't as prevalent as they are today. And anyway, so I was a grunt, I was a gopher. And because it was the George Carlin Show, most of my time was spent doing stuff for George Carlin. And, my bosses literally told me, like, listen, help out the cast when you can, but it's the George Carlin Show starring George Carlin. Like, whatever George needs, George gets. Worry about George. And when George is taken care of, then you can help whoever else needs it. But it's all about George. Got it. So in essence, I was George Carlin's assistant for a year as my first job out of college. Legendary comedian, awesome human being. Loved working for him. Loved that man. Would do that job again today. So, but it's my first year out in Hollywood, and speaking of A&M Consolidated, so Sean Lofgren, who was one of my best friends in high school, he was coming out with his then girlfriend, now his wife, Cindy, and they were coming out to visit me. They were going to come out to LA for a week, and they were going to visit me for a couple of days, and so it was great. It was the first time somebody from my past was going to come see me in Hollywood, and I kind of I wanted to show off a little bit. So I said to George, we were doing an episode of the show, and they were going to come to a taping of the show. So I go to George and I said, hey, George, I know there's usually a couple of errands that you need me to run after the show, but I have some friends in town that are coming to the show tonight. And after the show, I kind of wanted to show them around the stage and give them a tour. Would you mind? Would it be okay? Whatever you need me to do after the show, could you tell me now? And could I just take care of them for you now before the show? He goes, yeah, that's totally fine. I just need you to do this and that, grab my laundry, whatever it was. He had 3 or 4 things. I said, great, totally happy to do it. Thanks, George. Thank you so much. Have a great show. Break a leg. Okay, so after the show now, I'm bringing them down and I'm showing them around. This is where the camera operators are. This is where the grip sits. This is what a grip does, blah, blah, blah. I'm, trying to show off, right? And so all of a sudden, George Carlin walks up. And I don't know if younger people appreciate how big a star George Carlin was. One of the greatest comedians of all time ever, just a legendary guy. And, they'd just seen a half-hour show where, he's the star. George Carlin walks up and he goes, Matthew, are these your friends? Yeah. Sean and Cindy, George Carlin, Sean and Cindy. And George Carlin right then and there gives the big sell. I have to tell you, Matthew is going to be a big star in this town. He's a key cog of what we do. I consult with him every single day. We could not do the show with Matthew. He's so important to everything we're doing here. We could, again, I get lunch. I answer the phone. I pick up laundry. I'm the lowest of the low. And to hear George talk about it, this show would fall apart if I didn't exist. How important I was specifically to the show and to him personally. And he's like, look, he had 2 copies of the script from that show that night. He goes, here, and he's autographed them. He goes, here, I got you some copies of the script, and come on, let's take a picture, and how did you guys meet, and what are you going to do when you're in LA? And he spends like a good 5 minutes with us or whatever. And he's all engaged in Sean and Cindy. And, anyway, he's like, all right, well, great. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming to the show. I really appreciate it, and blah, blah, blah. And Matthew, I'll see you tomorrow. Walks off. And, so Sean and Cindy are floating on air.
Yeah.
Next day, I go to George and I say, George, oh my God, that was amazing last night. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that, but man, oh man, that was incredible. Thank you so much. He says to me, he goes, listen, you're a good kid. You work your ass off. I'm happy to do it. He goes, but more importantly, he goes, anyone else that ever comes by, I want you to bring them to me. Anyone else that wants to meet me, that needs a picture, that needs an autograph, whatever, I want you to bring them to me. He goes, because here's the thing. Your friends, your Sean and Cindy, for the rest of their lives, the next time my name comes up in a conversation, they'll be like, I met Carlin once. He's a pretty nice guy. As opposed to, yeah, you know what? I ran into Carlin. He wouldn't even take a picture with me, that asshole. He goes, 30 seconds of my life for a lifetime fan, I'll make that trade every single day.
I love it.
And as I thought about it, and I remembered like, oh, wow, that's right. Because I hadn't really noticed it or thought about it because I was just sort of like, just do my job. But in the month that I'd been there, like every single day, one of my duties for Carlin was he would hand me a stack of like signed autographs or memorabilia or pictures that he'd signed, you know, comedy albums that he'd signed that I would have to deliver, that I would either have to mail or I would have to, you know, take around the Warner Brothers lot. You know, and I remember, and as I started thinking about it, he would leave the show and I would see people come up to him and he would always stop and take pictures with people. And it just sort of, you know, hit me. And not that I'm anywhere, you know, I'm not in the same universe, you know, let alone the same zip code. I'm not in the same universe as George Carlin. But, you know, I am well known to a very specific group of people. And so to that extent, John, and you're different, obviously, because you and I know each other and we're friends and we have a personal relationship. But just my point is that when somebody reaches out, it doesn't always work out because if I'm with my kids or I'm late or whatever, but, you know, 99 times out of 100, if somebody reaches out, I try very hard to engage with them as best as I can, whether it's an email or a text or a, you know, person to person, because of that experience that I had with George Carlin. Again, I'm not saying I'm George Carlin, but to the extent that somebody is interested in my time or a photo with me or, you know, wants help with their fantasy team or a trash talk video for their league or whatever it is, I'm happy to do that.
You are George Carlin to many people, you know, in their
very
world.
kind.
And that's a perfect example though of how we are always kind of we're always kind of mentoring the people around us by what we do, by how we treat people, by like people are going to see it and you felt it and you're like, I want to make other people feel the way that I felt. Like you tend to do for others what you have done for you. And that's a beautiful story. That's a great example of how that works. You became a dad. You were on the quick on-ramp for being a dad whenever
I was.
Whenever you and Beth decided to make things official. And what did you learn, like going from you know, a single guy to being a co-parent of 3 teen boys? What did you learn about yourself in that short process?
You know, it's interesting. My wife and I, it's a second marriage for both my wife and both of us married young, both of us got divorced. When I moved out to Connecticut to take the job at ESPN, 2 years after having worked here, I met my now wife. We started dating. And we'd been dating about 7 or 8 months when Beth said to me, she said, and you should know that, like, in my first marriage, my wife and I did not have kids. I just had a dog. But that we had from the marriage. But my wife had 3 boys who were 10, 8, and 4 when we started dating. And I didn't meet the kids. She didn't want to be one of those moms that constantly was introducing, you know, men to her kids. And so, but we had been dating probably about 6, 7 months, maybe 8 months, and getting pretty serious. And she says, and I still hadn't met the kids at that point, by design. And she said, listen, we're getting serious here. And I think, you know, it's time for you to meet the boys and, you know, see what you think. She goes, but I don't want to introduce you to the boys and introduce you to their lives until I know where this is going. I don't want to introduce them to some guy that's, you know, going to leave in a month or whatever. Right. You know? And I said, I totally appreciate that. I think that's completely fair. You should protect them. They're young boys. They're impressionable. I said, but I also want to be honest with you. I don't know. I said, I really enjoy spending time with you. I love our time together, but our time together is very different than, hey, you know, whatever. Connor's late to lacrosse practice and Matt forgot a shoe and, you know, and David needs a doctor's appointment, you know, I got to drop David off at his doctor's appointment, blah, blah, blah. You know, like that just, you know, that's a different experience and a different existence, with 3 young boys. And I said, so I'm happy to meet them and try, but I want to be honest with you. I don't want to tell you 1,000% I'm sticking around or that like I'm committing to you, because I don't know what that life is like. And if I hate that life, I'm going to leave. You know what I mean? Like, and so she broke up with me, which I totally get. She's like, well, I can't, my kids are my first priority. I can't, if you can't commit to me, I can't risk that. And I'm like, I totally get it, but I don't want to I don't want to lie to you and say, yeah. And then I find out I hate the kids or the kids hate me, or I don't, I'm 40 years old at this point and I've never had kids. And so I just don't know what that existence is like. And so we broke up, and we broke up for about 2 months, but we would text and we would stay in touch and have a lunch here or there. And then eventually she just said, I really miss you, and screw it. I'm going to go for it. And I think we should get back together and you should meet the kids. And if you hate the kids or the kids hate you and it doesn't work, then at least we tried. But I think it's dumb to not try. And I said, okay, I'm down for that as well. And I ended up meeting the kids, and I love the kids. And that's what I found, to get back to answering your question, John. What I found was, like, I really wasn't sure what kind of father I would be. I wasn't sure how I would react to it. And what I found is that I really, really enjoyed it. Like, I'm off in my own head, as we can sort of see through this podcast. Like, I think a lot, my mind also races a million miles a minute. And when you're with kids, especially young kids, that can't happen, because you've got to focus on them. They don't let you think about anything else. Like, you've got to make sure that they're engaged and safe and, not running into traffic or whatever, like you've got to be super engaged. And as a result, I found that I loved kids. And then, so my wife and I, ever since we got married probably a year later, and then we immediately got pregnant. And, so now I went from like 0 to 5 kids within like 18 months.
Wow.
So my wife and I, because we're older, I found this out. I did not know this, but because my wife had been pregnant multiple times before, and the twins run in my family. I have 3 sets of twins on my side of the family. Like, so we have twin girls. So we were like, should we have kids ourselves? And we're like, well, at our age, who knows? And we're like, sort of like, well, you know what, let's try. And we'll sort of leave it to God. And, if it happens, great. And if it doesn't, we've got the boys. And like literally right out of the gate, which I did not realize this, maybe for people listening, by the way, is that people are like, oh, it's hard to get pregnant when you're older. Yes, it's hard to get pregnant when you're older if you've never had kids. But when you've been pregnant before, and obviously my wife had been pregnant multiple times before, when you've had a lot of kids or whatever, it's actually super easy to get pregnant when you're older. You're actually you're even more fertile at 41, I guess my wife was at the time. We got married when I was 40. So when we were both 40, we're the same age. So we got pregnant at 41. So it's anyway, kind of insane. And so I went from like basically 0 to 5 kids in under 2 years. So it's been a lot, but it's been great and it's fun. And that's what I discovered about myself, is that I had a larger capacity to love, a larger capacity to care about other people, a desire to get outside of my own head and think about others.
So to kind of tie this all in, right? I think when you with kids, and even with Tom Brady or you, kids do really ground you, hopefully, right? If you're a loving father, I think some guys just maybe don't have that ability, and they're so kind of involved in their vision in their life that they kind of neglect the treasures of being a father are, right? And there's a lot of men that have fathers that weren't dialed into their life. But I don't know of one thing in my life. So I worked for myself for many years. I'm in the middle of a business acquisition right now. It's, life when you're creative and you're writing your own checks, and you can get caught up in securing your future, right? There's always something to do. And I have 2 children, 12 and 9, and nothing in my life has given me the ability in the moment, right? And it's something I can even choose now. Okay, I'm going to go every day. We play football and basketball when he comes, when I pick the kids up from school. And it's one of those decisions, right? Like this hour after school. And it's been really pivotal, right? And looking at some people in the sports world, you can kind of tell the guys that do that, right? They tend to just be different and consistent in who they are. And I don't know. And maybe you can attest to that. But I mean, is that what kids have done for you too? They just, it sounds like they have in what you shared, but
yeah, no, 100%, 1,000%. You just sort of, you realize that it's not about you. They ground you, and when they have drama at school or whatever, or kids mean to them, or they lose a game, a little league game or whatever it is, it just kills you, right? Because you're just like, you want to protect them, and you want to and you gotta kind of let them find their own path, right? But it's and there's nothing you can do but other than just try to be supportive and root for them. And but yeah, it's definitely changed my outlook on life 100%.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one thing I enjoy about your Instagram is, and for those of you listening, it's at Matthew Berry TMR. You always include your kids in it, and I think my favorite was your daughters roasting you.
Yeah.
But why do you do that? Like it's not just about your sports content. It's not just about selling your brand. Why do you include your family in that stuff?
I don't know that I'm particularly good at social media. I think I'm okay at it, but I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing there. I'm lucky to have a lot of followers, which are nice, but I think that the people that are fans of me are fans because they like my fantasy advice, but they like me. Like they're interested in my life. Like when I do my columns, I write about my life and my wife and my kids and experiences that I have. And so, when I do my podcast, we have, like, it's not just fantasy football or not just sports betting. Like it's the majority of the content I do is often about me. And so I try to share parts of my life. There was a time when I didn't want to put my daughters or any of my kids on social media, and I tried to hide their faces somewhat. But then, my kids are on social media. They're on Instagram. They're on TikTok. They see stuff and they want to be on it. And so it's one of those things that I enjoy doing as well. And we try to pick our spots with them, but it's also something they enjoy as well. So I try to just sort of I think social media, people use social media different ways, but for me, it's just a reflection of my life, hopefully, and things that I want to share, both professional and personal.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. It's been fun. It's been a lot of walks down memory lane, but it's also been great to even get to know you more and your life, your fantasy life. I encourage everybody to pick up the book, hardcover. I got a signed. I ordered it off of Amazon. Do you sign every single one of your books?
No, but there are a lot of signed copies of them out there. Yeah, I signed as many. If somebody gives me one, I sign it. Yeah. So it did well. It did. It debuted at number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. It spent many months on the list, and so the paperback did well as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really proud of that book. So it took me 2 years. It took 2 years of my life. Yeah.
Not bad for an AM radio DJ.
Not bad.
What else you got coming up that people need to know about?
Well, if they're interested in fantasy sports, they should go to fantasylife.com and check out all the stuff we're doing there in terms of the newsletter, all the free tools. It's a free newsletter that comes every single day. But otherwise, just, follow me on social media. I am at Matthew Berry TMR on all forms of social media, except the Fantasy Life app where I'm merely at Matthew Berry. But all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Be sure to pass on that message from Sean to Tom Brady and
I will. And from you to Carissa. I got it. Understood.
And for those of you that are still listening, hang around. In just a few seconds, we're going to come back and do after the interview. Thanks again, Matthew. It's great having you.
Thanks, John. Sean, nice to meet you.
Take care, man.
Well, we're back with After the Interview, and Sean was a little under the weather today, so he didn't jump in a whole lot there. But
Yeah.
Sean, this is I talked a lot, so I'm gonna throw it to you here. What were your impressions with Mr. Barry, the talented Mr. Roto?
You know what? I think his just his story. I life can throw you some opportunities, right? But a guy like him, and a lot of people, we may have talked about this, maybe personally or on a podcast, I don't remember which, but a lot of people assume success just it's luck of the draw, right? Like it just happens. And I think if you were listening to any part of his story, he created his luck, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just not where he's at. Sure, he had maybe a break and it was between him and someone else, but he worked hard. I mean, what high school kid goes to school, plays tennis, and works 5 hours every night? I mean, that's a rigorous schedule.
Yeah.
That I'm sure whoever in Hollywood, right, George, they looked at that and they're like, wow, this high school kid, he put in hours, then he can obviously get Carlin sandwiches and do his laundry, right? And then that propels you. All those things that we see that people don't want to waste their time on because they don't understand how critical they are in creating a foundation of relationship, right? So not only does he work hard, he's obviously values relationship and what that brings to the table, and now he's where he's at, right? So on top of understanding, meeting a need in the space that he's in, but that was a takeaway for me, right? He's just not there on accident.
Yeah, and we didn't get a lot into his story. You and I know it just from research and from the book and all that. But I think, there's this kind of cliche of like, what do you do with your free time?
Yeah.
And whatever you do with your free time, find a way to make a living doing that. And, when people succeed at that, they always say anybody can do anything they want to do and be anything they want to be. And there's just the reality is for every one of those, there's 99 that
Right.
tried to make their hobby a career and it didn't work out. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important that no matter what he was doing in his career, he kept doing his hobbies.
Right.
So fantasy sports is a hobby he picked up in high school before anybody else knew what it was.
Yeah. Very few people did it back then.
Yeah.
Right.
And he kept doing it and started a side project of a website while he was working as a writer in LA. And yeah, it did eventually become his career, but a lot of it's because he invested a lot in his hobby. It wasn't like he just kind of like did it occasionally, right?
Yeah. No, he was. Yeah, if you do some research, he was pretty all in, and kind of gave up the more obvious career path of being a writer. He was a writer on Married with Children, which back in the day then was huge.
Yeah,
I mean that was not a small, and had some other opportunities. So yeah, I admire that, right? But the one thing I do think of, and I'm glad that he has the relationship with his kids, right? A person like him that he said what does he do for fun? He works, right? To me, that's like, so the challenge for him is how to turn it off, right? And probably the only way to do that was kids,
yeah.
And
I think an easy part though with the kids too, especially the boys, is that, and I've seen this in his social medias, is that it is kind of fun for your kids when your work is that they get to come to the Super Bowl, or
right,
your work is they get to meet
makes
Tom
it a little
Brady.
easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Yeah, mine was going to the nursing home on Sunday to sing to the old people. Not as fun.
That was your dad taking you to work?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
all dressed up. You're tired after a spaghetti dinner on Sunday and you got to go to the nursing home. We all joke about that a lot, but
yeah.
I mean, sure, it's good, but not as sexy as going to throw football with some NFL guys on the sideline.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciate Matthew's generosity. I love the George Carlin story. I love how, that's happened to me in my life. I had a situation where I failed somebody that I was working for, and I came in to work later, and as soon as I walked in the door, He walked up, grabbed me by the shoulders and said, John, this does not define you. Do not let this be a burden on your back.
Yeah.
It's over. Let it go. And then later, I was talking to one of my coworkers, and he said, John, before you came back, he went around to each of us and said, whatever you do, do not joke with John about this. Don't say anything about it. Let it go. So he not only wanted to affirm me in a moment of failure, he wanted to protect me.
Yeah.
And that has made me do that for other people, because I experienced it myself. I know what it felt like, and I want other people to have that same experience. So that's why I love the George Carlin story. And I'm sure it's played a big role in his generosity, with people.
Yeah. I mean, he kind of answered that question. I was going to ask, what was the most pivotal moment in his personal life? And I think that was a blending of two, right? It changed how he would work in the future, but it also showed the value of that the superstar understands, hey, these moments are important, right? Recognizing people, making them feel known, even if it's for 5 minutes, can literally be one of their top 5 experiences of their whole life. And it costs you nothing, right? Really. And that's a lesson for all of us, right? I think it's not that most of us don't have time. It's not a priority, right? And my wife hates that, but she's like, oh, the person's probably busy. I'm like, no, it just wasn't a priority. And I just wish people would say that, right? Most of us have time to respond. If he does, right? We're not getting 300 texts a day, but just how critical that is to building lives. If we want friendships, if we want to feel known, if we want, then that intentionality and those small moments is what builds that, right? So,
and the generosity, I mean, this was after we were off the air, but Matthew said, as soon as you post this, let me know so I can post it on my social media.
He's the first one. He's the first one of our guests.
No disparity to any of our other guests, but
no, but that's his that's his mindset, right? Yeah. Like we're probably, out of the 4 podcasts that he's going to be recording today, we're probably the least of them by far.
Probably.
Well, you never know, but dude, I have huge sway in the social medias.
Yeah, I know. So the dozens of you that are listening know that Matthew, that says a lot, that he offered it. He didn't wait for us to ask for it. So let's get personal for a moment, Sean. Is there anybody in your life that has set that example? Because like you said, other people are busy, or they don't have time, or they don't make the time for things. But a lot of times, again, that was never modeled for them. And so, they're kind of doing default what their experience has been. Has there been somebody in your life that modeled something like that for you, that's shaped the leader you are today, the dad, the boss that you are today? Somebody that stood out, and it doesn't even have to be somebody you worked for. It could be somebody you read a book or article or something, and you're like, I want to be like that person.
For me, it hasn't been a particular person I've heard. There's been a lot of great friends, but I can't think of anyone in the moment that is like the one that changed it. But there's been a lot of negative moments that I think back on, and I touched on it in the podcast, high school, and those negative moments, it's like I don't ever want to be that person, or I don't want people to feel this way around me. And so it's really turning that internal emotion into future action, right? And whether it's with friends or community, or college kids coming to me with stupid ideas about how they're going to create the best business there is, and they don't even know how to write, or put together a proper P&L, right? It's creating that space for them, and that, so, which I'm sure a psychologist might have some input on, right? Like, why did the negative moments shape you, and why can't you remember the positive ones? That's a good question, and I wish I could pinpoint more of those, but I think for most of us, right, if we have 9 compliments, we always remember the one negative comment. Maybe I'm that guy. Maybe I struggle with that. But
I think that can be true for a lot of us,
Yeah.
but what's great is you're breaking that cycle, and the people that you're working with, you're creating positive memories and
Yeah.
positive moments.
Yeah. Because I want to be that guy, right? That's just consistency. I mean, we've talked about this consistency and how people say, hey, this is the way Sean is. I want it to be the same with you and the guy that I have coffee with twice a year, right? Like you both have a similar experience. Sure, our relationship's deeper, but how you show up for people can be consistent. And just kind of your being present and then following through on the small thing that they may ask, right? That consistency is important, and it's somewhat telling of how much you believe, how much you believe yourself, to go back to an earlier podcast, right? Like, do you believe yourself and how you care for people and love people and really have a broader vision? And if you don't do those things, I think it chips away at that belief in yourself and the honesty that maybe your motivation is, you leveraging relationships like Matt said, where people just want kind of business or they want something from you. And maybe you're that guy and you didn't realize that. And if you're not consistent, you might be that guy, but you can change that. Right. I think it's, once you recognize that, it's an easy thing to change because it doesn't require a huge change of personality. It's just changing small decisions that have those ripple effects. So
yeah, really changing your perspective from what can I take from this to what can I contribute to this,
right?
From how can I serve you, how can I, and even people, can often seem like inconveniences in our life, people's needs, people's problems, failures, whatever. And you can shift that mindset from they're an inconvenience to they're an opportunity.
Right.
When somebody fails you, it is an opportunity to be kind and to show grace and to really surprise them,
right?
With how you respond, rather than an opportunity to just air your frustration and be inconvenienced and move on to something else.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, man, thank you, Sean, for joining today. I know that you've been under the weather, and a big thanks and shout out to Matthew Berry for just being so kind and generous with his time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time to listen. Again, please like us, follow us, share us. We hope this has been an encouragement to you. And most of all, as we always say, we hope that you will continue to experience the power of being known.